The auction house was filled with smoke and noise, a place where voices mixed with the clatter of chains and the cold laugh of merchants. Aliens of many kinds gathered in the dark hall, their eyes hungry for bargains. The stage was lit by harsh lights, and from the shadows a small figure was dragged out. She was pale, thin, and trembling, her skin marked with strange symbols. The auctioneer shouted her name and her price, calling her a worthless creature. He said she was sterile, unable to give children, unable to bring value. To most of the buyers in that hall, she was nothing but a waste of space. The crowd began to laugh. Some called her cursed. Some whispered that she was broken. No one wanted to raise their hand. She stood with her wrists in metal cuffs, her eyes fixed on the floor. Her heart pounded with shame. She remembered being told again and again that she was useless, that she would never be chosen, never be wanted. Her stomach was empty, her body weak, and her spirit fading. Still deep inside, a small part of her hoped for something different. The auctioneer grew impatient. He slammed his stick on the wooden floor, his voice rose with anger as he tried to sell her. He promised she would work hard. He shouted that even the sterile could serve as labor. But no one answered. The hall grew quiet except for the low murmur of cruel laughter. It was as if the entire galaxy had already decided her fate. She was nothing. She was broken. And then, from the corner of the hall, a human raised his hand. It was such a small action, but in that silence, it echoed like thunder. Heads turned sharply. Eyes widened. The auctioneer froze for a moment before repeating the bid. The crowd burst into noise again, some shocked, some amused. A human farmer had dared to make the first and only offer. The girl looked up slowly, her pale eyes meeting the stranger's for the first time. She expected to see mockery in his face, but instead she saw something steady. His eyes were calm, almost gentle. There was no laughter, no scorn, only thoughtfulness. She could not understand it. Why would he choose her? What did he see that others could not? The auctioneer, eager to make any sale at all, banged his stick again and called out the final count. 1, 2, 3. Sold to the human farmer. The chains clinked as she was pushed off the stage and handed over, the crowd whispered as she passed. Some said he was a fool. Others said humans were strange creatures always chasing after broken things. The farmer did not argue, he did not explain. He simply took the chain from the guard and walked away. The girl followed because she had no choice. Her mind was spinning. She wondered if he would punish her. She wondered if he bought her only to use her until she broke. Fear wrapped around her chest. She had seen what happened to those taken from auctions before, and it was rarely kind. But this man was different. His steps were steady and quiet. He did not pull her roughly. He did not speak words of cruelty. Outside the auction house, the night air was cool and sharp. For the first time in a long while, she breathed freely. She glanced at him, still confused, still afraid. Her heart was beating fast, but something inside her whispered that this was not the end. It might be a beginning. The journey from the market to his transport was short, but for her it felt endless. Every sound of her chains reminded her of her worthlessness. Every whisper from the crowd burned into her mind. Yet the human did not look at her with disgust. He walked as though he had made a choice he would not regret. She studied his hands, rough with work, not the hands of a rich master but of a simple man. She realized he was no merchant, no noble, just a farmer. Why would a farmer risk his money on her? Inside the small ship that waited for them, he finally removed the chains. Her arms fell heavy and free. She rubbed her wrists in disbelief. No master had ever done that before. He gave her a small piece of bread and a drink of water. Simple gifts, but to her they were treasures. She stared at him, unable to speak. He did not demand thanks. He simply said, "Eat," and turned back to the controls. In that moment, something changed in her heart. She still did not trust him. She still carried the fear of what might come. But she could not deny that the human farmer was unlike anyone she had ever met. He had seen her when no one else did. He had chosen her when all others had turned away. The auction hall faded behind them. swallowed by the night sky. The girl sat quietly in the corner of the ship, bread in her hands, her mind filled with questions and with a strange new feeling she had never known. Before, hope, fragile and trembling, began to stir. The galaxy had called her worthless, but one human had dared to take a chance, and that single choice was about to change both of their lives forever. The auction house grew restless when the human farmer raised his hand. At first it felt like a mistake, a slip of motion. But when he spoke clearly, his voice carried through the hall. He made his bid with steady words, not loud but firm enough for all to hear. For a heartbeat, silence filled the air. Then the whole room burst into shocked whispers. The crowd could not believe what had just happened. The auctioneer, who had almost given up hope, blinked in surprise. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the human. He quickly repeated the amount, his voice rising with excitement. He slammed his stick again to make the moment feel grand. "Do I hear another offer?" He shouted. His voice echoed around the hall, but no one answered. No one wanted her. No one thought she was worth even half that price. The aliens in the seats began to murmur louder. Some laughed openly, pointing at the human. "He is a fool," one sneered. "A waste of money," another spat. "Humans are always strange, taking broken things," a third added. They shook their heads and mocked him, but the farmer did not flinch. He kept his eyes on the girl standing in chains. His face did not show pride or shame, only calm certainty. The girl felt her breath catch in her throat. Her whole life she had been told that no one would want her. She was sterile, useless, broken. Now, in the middle of that cruel hall, a man had bid for her. She lifted her eyes for the first time, and met his gaze. His eyes were not cruel, not mocking, not hungry like the others. They were steady, like the eyes of someone who saw a storm coming but chose to walk into it anyway. The auctioneer grinned, sensing victory. He raised his stick, again his voice booming. "Going once, going twice, sold." The sound of the wooden stick against the floor marked the end of her old life. The crowd erupted with noise, some clapping mockingly, others shouting insults. Yet none dared challenge the final call. She had been sold, not because she was wanted, by many, but because one man dared to choose her. The guards unlocked her chains and pushed her toward the human. Her legs felt heavy as she stumbled forward. Her wrists still ached from the metal cuffs. Her mind raced with fear. What would he do with her? Why had he chosen her? She wanted to ask, but no words would leave her lips. Instead, she lowered her head and waited for him to show his true face. The farmer reached out and took the chain gently. He did not yank it as others would. His grip was firm, but not cruel. Without speaking, he turned and began to walk out of the hall. She followed because she had no choice. Her heart pounded as they moved past the rows of aliens who stared and whispered. Every step felt like walking deeper into an unknown fate. Behind them, the auctioneer's voice rose again, already moving to the next sale. The hall filled with more laughter and clamor, but for the girl, the world had grown narrow and quiet. She could hear only the sound of her own breathing, the soft steps of the human and the faint rattle of the chain. The air outside the auction house was cold, sharp against her skin. For a brief second, she felt the taste of freedom, though the chain reminded her it was not real. The human said nothing as they walked through the streets toward his ship. Crowd still whispered, some pointing, some shaking their heads, but he did not answer them. He kept moving, calm as if their voices did not matter. She stole glances at him, searching for cruelty on his face, but she found none. Only a strange, quiet strength, the kind that came from a man used to work in silence. When they reached the small ship, he stopped and pressed a button. The hatch opened with a hiss. He guided her inside. The space was plain, not the ship of a rich master. It smelled of earth and grain. She realized he was truly just a farmer, not a man of power or wealth. That made her confusion grow. Why would a simple farmer waste his coin on someone like her? He closed the hatch and removed the chain from her wrists. Her hands dropped free. She rubbed the sore skin, too shocked to believe he had already unbound her. No one had ever done that before. Then he reached into a small pack and pulled out a piece of bread. He handed it to her without a word. At first, she hesitated, afraid it was some trick, but her hunger was too strong. She took it and ate, each bite filling her empty stomach. The human turned back to the controls of the ship. He did not watch her as she ate. He did not demand thanks. His silence felt strange to her. She had lived among masters who always wanted obedience, always wanted fear, yet this man gave her food and freedom from chains without asking anything. Her heart was filled with questions. She did not know his name, she did not know his purpose. But deep inside, a spark of something warm began to grow. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her not for what she could give, but simply because he wanted to. As the ship lifted from the ground, leaving the market far behind, the girl sat quietly in her seat. The bread still warm in her hands, her mind raced with fear, hope, and disbelief. She looked at the human farmer one more time, his face calm in the glow of the ship's lights. She realized that this was only the beginning of something unknown. And though she was afraid, she also felt that maybe, just maybe, this choice would change everything. The human farmer's ship landed on a quiet planet far from the noise of markets and auction houses. The air was clean, filled with the smell of soil and green fields. The alien girl stepped down slowly, her bare feet touching soft ground instead of cold stone. She looked around with wide eyes, expecting to see guards or chains waiting for her. But there were none. What she saw instead was a stretch of farmland, simple and humble, with crops growing and animals grazing nearby. It was not a rich estate, it was not a palace, but it felt alive in a way she had never known. The farmer walked ahead of her, his steps calm. He pointed toward a small wooden house at the edge of the field. "This is home," he said in a steady voice. The word confused her. She had never had a home. Only cages and dark corners. She followed him, uncertain and nervous. Her heart told her this peace could not last. She wondered when the cruelty would show, when he would remind her she was worthless. Inside the house, everything was simple. A table, chairs, shelves filled with tools, and a fire burning slowly in the corner. The warmth of the fire touched her skin, and for the first time in years she did not feel cold. The farmer gave her a blanket, rough but clean. He set down food on the table, bread, a bowl of stew, and water. She hesitated, unsure if it was truly for her. He nodded once and sat across the table. "Eat," he said. She ate quickly, almost desperately, the taste of real food almost making her cry. She kept waiting for questions or commands, but none came. He did not ask about her past. He did not ask what she could give him. After the meal, he showed her a small room with a bed. It was plain, but to her it looked like something from another world. She touched the blanket as if it might vanish. "You can sleep here," he told her. His voice was neither harsh nor kind, just steady. He left her there and closed the door. That night she lay awake on the bed, staring at the wooden ceiling. Her mind was restless. She remembered the voices from the auction, the laughter, the whispers that called her broken. She wondered why this man had chosen her when no one else would. She thought maybe it was a trick, that he would wait until she trusted him before showing cruelty. Fear kept her eyes open, but slowly the warmth of the bed pulled her into sleep. The next morning he woke her early. The sun had barely risen when he gave her simple clothes, a shirt and trousers fit for work. "On the farm everyone works," he said. His words made her nervous. She'd always been told she was too weak, too useless. Yet he gave her no cruel look, only tools, and led her outside. He showed her how to plant seeds, how to press them gently into the earth. His hands were rough but skilled. He moved with patience, and when she made mistakes, he corrected her calmly. At first, her body struggled. Her arms shook when she carried buckets of water. Her back ached from bending, but he did not scold her. He only showed her how to work with rhythm, how to breathe and move slowly. She began to notice the soil felt soft in her hands, the plants small but strong. Each day she worked beside him, and each day her body grew steadier. Her hands became rough like his, her arms stronger. The animals on the farm watched her curiously. Small creatures with fur and bright eyes came close when she fed them. She was surprised that they did not fear her. They accepted her presence as if she belonged there. She started to smile without meaning to. When they gathered near for the first time, she felt she had a place, not as a slave, not as a burden, but as part of something living. But inside, doubt still lived. At night, she sat by the small window of her room, looking at the stars. She whispered to herself that she was still worthless, still broken. She wondered if one day he would see, that truth and regret taking her. She sometimes thought of running away, but where would she go? The galaxy had already shown her how cruel it could be. One evening, after a long day of planting, she dared to ask him, "Why did you take me?" Her voice trembled. He did not look up right away. He finished tying a bundle of crops before answering. "Because you needed a chance," he said. His words were simple, but they struck her deeply. She stared at him, trying to understand. No one had ever said she deserved a chance. No one had ever seen her as anything but broken. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, she began to change. Her back grew straight, her hands strong. She learned to laugh softly when the animals played near her. She learned to cook small meals, to fix broken tools. Each time she succeeded, she felt something inside her grow warmer. She was not giving him children, she was not giving him wealth, but she was working, living, and being seen as a person. Sometimes the neighbors passed by and she heard their whispers. Some laughed at the farmer, calling him foolish for keeping her. Their words cut her deeply, but the farmer never wavered. He would nod politely to them and return to work, as if their opinions were dust in the wind. His quiet strength gave her courage. She began to believe that maybe she was not as worthless as the world had told her. One night after finishing their work, she stood outside the house, the sky filled with stars. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The air smelled of earth and growth, not chains and smoke. For the first time in her life, she felt something that she never thought she could. She felt safe, and that safety, fragile and new, gave her the strength to hope that perhaps she was not broken after all. The days on the farm passed slowly, filled with the sound of tools, the cry of animals, and the rustle of crops growing in the wind. The alien girl worked beside the human farmer every morning, learning to care for the land. Her hands grew stronger, her body healthier, and though she still carried doubt in her heart, she began to feel a small sense of belonging. But the world outside the farm did not stay silent. Whispers began to rise among the neighbors and other farmers, and those whispers carried sharp edges. When the farmer went to the market to sell his crops, people stared at the girl who walked beside him. Some covered their mouths to hide their laughter. Others spoke openly. "That's the one who was sold. It's worthless," someone said. "Why would a man waste money on her?" Another asked. "He could have bought a real worker, a strong one," muttered a third. The words cut into her like knives. She lowered her eyes, shame filling her chest. The farmer carried on, as though he had not heard them. His steps steady, his face calm. He sold his crops, bought supplies, and walked away, ignoring their voices, but she could not ignore them. At night, she lay awake in her small bed, remembering their laughter, remembering their cruel words. She whispered to herself that maybe they were right. Maybe she truly was worthless. Maybe the farmer would one day realize it too and cast her out. Tears slid silently down her face as she hugged her blanket tight. The fire from the other room flickered faintly, but it could not warm her heart. The whispers grew stronger as weeks passed. Sometimes neighbors came near the farm and spoke to the farmer. She listened quietly from the doorway as they told him he was making a mistake. "She cannot give you children," one said. "She cannot grow your family name." Another added, "One day you will regret this, mark my words." The farmer's face stayed calm. He did not shout. He did not argue. He only replied with quiet strength, "Her worth is not measured that way." His words shocked her more than the insults did. One evening, when the sky was painted orange with sunset, she found herself alone in the field. She knelt by the crops, her hands digging into the soil. The earth felt warm and alive, but her heart felt heavy. She thought of running away. She thought of leaving before he realized she was not worth his kindness. But when she looked toward the farmhouse, she saw him fixing a fence, his shoulders bent with honest labor. He did not look like a man burdened by regret. He looked like a man who had chosen his path. And that path included her. Still, doubt filled her. That night, she whispered to him in a trembling voice, "Why do you defend me?" He paused, setting down the tool in his hand. His gaze met hers, calm and steady as always. "Because I know what I see," he said. His voice was firm but gentle. "The others only see what they've been told. But I see who you are." She could not answer. Her throat tightened with emotion. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. The next day she worked harder than ever, carrying water, feeding the animals, and helping repair tools. Her body ached, but she pushed herself. She wanted to prove that she was not a burden. She wanted to show him, and maybe herself, that she had value. By evening her hands were raw and blistered. She tried to hide them from him, but he noticed. He shook his head gently and wrapped her hands in clean cloth. "You don't need to destroy yourself to prove anything," he said softly. She looked at him in silence, her heart confused. The neighbors continued their cruel talk. Some said she cursed the farm. Others claimed she would bring only ruin. But as the weeks stretched into months, the opposite began to show. The crops grew taller and stronger. The animals were healthier. The farm was becoming more fruitful than it had ever been before. People started to notice, but instead of admitting their mistake, they whispered that it must be luck. They could not believe she had anything to do with it. The girl heard their words and still felt doubt, but now she also carried something else inside her, a fragile spark of pride. She had helped plant the seeds. She had worked through storms. She had cared for the animals with her own hands. She could see the farm thriving around her, and though she still feared the whispers, she could not deny that she was part of its growth. One night, after a long day of work, the farmer sat with her by the fire. The crackle of flames filled the silence between them. At last he spoke. "Let them talk," he said. "Their words are empty, but what we build here is real." She turned her face toward him, his expression steady in the firelight. In that moment, she felt something she had never dared to feel before. She felt safe. She felt defended. She felt that maybe, just maybe, she was no longer worthless. The whispers of the neighbors still circled the farm like cold winds, but inside the farmhouse, a different truth was being built. It was quiet, it was fragile, but it was strong enough to hold her trembling heart. For the first time she began to believe that worth was not given by others. It was found in small acts, in hard work, and in the steady voice of someone who chose to stand beside her, no matter what the world said. And that thought, though small, gave her hope that the whispers would one day fade into silence. The season changed, and the warm sun gave way to dark clouds. The air grew heavy, and the sky turned gray. A storm was coming, stronger than any the farm had faced in years. The neighbors spoke with worry. Some even came to warn the farmer that his land would not survive. Many of them began to store food, to protect what little they had. The girl listened to their fearful words and felt her own chest tighten. She had finally begun to feel like she belonged. But what if the storm destroyed everything? Would the farmer regret ever choosing her? The first winds came in the night, shaking the windows of the farmhouse. Rain hammered the roof like falling stones. The animals cried out in fear, and the crops bent low under the weight of the storm. The girl stood by the window, watching the world outside turn wild. Her heart raced with fear, but when she turned, she saw the farmer moving quickly, gathering tools and lanterns. He looked at her and said firmly, "We will not lose this farm, not if we stand together." And those words gave her courage. She followed him into the storm. The wind pushed against her body, and the rain soaked her clothes until she was shivering, but she did not stop. They worked side by side, tying down the weaker parts of the fence, covering the animals with thick sheets and digging trenches so the water would not drown the fields. Her hands slipped in the mud. Her body ached, but each time she stumbled, the farmer pulled her back to her feet. All night they worked. The storm howled, lightning split the sky, and thunder roared like a beast. Her arms burned with pain and her legs felt heavy, but she kept moving. She could see the determination in the farmer's eyes. He would not let his land fall, and she would not let him fight alone. At one point, the wind knocked her to the ground, mud splashing across her face. For a moment, she wanted to give up. But then she saw the farmer's hand reaching down to her. His voice cut through the storm. "On your feet. You are stronger than you know." She pushed herself up, her heart burning with a strange new fire. By morning, the storm finally passed. The sky cleared and the sun rose weak but warm. The land around the village was broken. Fields had been washed away, fences torn down, and many farms stood in ruin. People walked through the mud with hopeless faces, but when the girl looked at their own land, she saw something different. Their fences still stood, their animals were alive, and though the fields were damaged, many of the crops had survived. Her chest filled with relief. They had saved it. They had fought against the storm and won. The neighbors came, shocked to see their farm still standing. Some whispered in disbelief, some stared in silence. They had called her worthless. They had said she was cursed, but now their eyes told a different story. The girl lowered her head, shy under their gaze, but deep inside something bloomed. For the first time she felt proud. She had worked through the storm, she had bled and struggled, and she had helped protect the farm. In the days that followed, while others mourned their losses, the farmer and the girl gathered their surviving harvest. Their crops were healthier than expected, strong enough to feed not only themselves but also to trade. The neighbors, who once mocked them, came to ask for food. Their voices carried shame, but the farmer did not mock them in return. He shared what he could. His quiet kindness left them speechless. The girl watched this with wide eyes. She saw how easily he could have laughed at them, how he could have turned them away. Instead, he helped, just as he had once helped her. It made her realize something important. Strength was not only in the body, it was also in the heart. The farmer's strength was steady, not cruel, and she wanted to learn that strength. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she finally spoke. Her voice soft but filled with emotion. "I thought I was worthless, but when the storm came, you did not treat me that way. You trusted me to stand with you." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "For the first time, I felt like I mattered." The farmer looked at her, his gaze calm. "You do matter," he said. His words were simple, but they struck her deeper than any storm. As weeks passed, their farm not only recovered but thrived. The soil seemed richer, the crops taller, and the animals stronger. People from other villages came to see. They asked the farmer how he had done it. He only said, "Hard work and trust." The girl stood quietly by his side, her heart filled with something she could not name. She was no longer just a shadow bought from an auction. She was part of this place, part of its strength. The storm that had nearly destroyed everything became the very test that proved her worth. She remembered the mud on her face, the pain. In her arms, the sound of his voice telling her she was stronger than she knew. That memory stayed with her, burning brighter than the cruel laughter of the past. At night, when she lay in her bed, she no longer whispered that she was worthless. Instead, she whispered that she was strong, that she belonged. And though fear and doubt still lingered in her heart, she now had proof that she could stand against the storm, not alone but together with him. That knowledge gave her peace. The storm had tried to break her, but instead it had shown her who she truly was. The farm grew strong again after the storm. The crops were tall, the animals healthy, and the land richer than before. The alien girl worked every day with the human farmer, and with each sunrise she felt more like she belonged. Yet a question always lived in her heart. Why had the farm survived when so many others were destroyed? Why did their soil seem to carry more life than anyone else's? She thought it was only luck, but one night the answer came in a way she never expected. It was late, the stars shining brightly above, when an elder alien came walking down the dirt path to the farmhouse. His steps were slow, his back bent with age, but his eyes were sharp. The farmer greeted him with respect. Giving him a chair by the fire, the girl stayed near the corner, nervous. She did not know this elder, but when his gaze fell on her, it felt as though he already knew her story. The elder spoke softly, his voice like wind through dry leaves. "I have heard whispers of your farm while others starve, your land thrives." He looked at the girl with deep, knowing eyes. And I know why. She froze, her hands trembling. She thought he had come to expose her worthlessness again. But his words carried something different. He explained slowly. Your species has always been rare. Even those born sterile carry within them a gift. It is not a gift of children, but of life itself. Wherever you walk, the soil becomes richer, the seeds feel your presence, and they grow stronger. The girl stared at him in shock. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Could it be true? Could she, the one everyone had called broken, be the reason the farm was alive? The farmer listened carefully, his face calm, but his eyes glowed with quiet understanding. He asked, So it was never luck, it was her? The elder nodded. Yes, she is no curse. She is a blessing. But most of the galaxy has forgotten this truth. They see only what she cannot do, never what she brings. Tears welled in the girl's eyes. She shook her head. No, that cannot be. I was sold as worthless. I was called broken. Her voice cracked with pain. The elder leaned closer, his gaze steady. That is because they are blind. They see value only in what they desire. They never looked deeper, but the earth knows you. The life around you knows you. That is your gift. Her heart pounded as she remembered the storm, the way the crops had survived, the way the animals had grown stronger. She thought it was chance. But maybe it was her all along. She pressed her hands to her chest, trembling. The farmer reached out and rested his hand gently on her shoulder, his voice firm. I knew you were not worthless. Now you know it too. The elder stayed for a while longer, sharing old stories of her people. He told how long ago her kind were treasured for their bond with the land. But as generations passed, their true worth was forgotten, and they became targets of cruelty. He left before dawn, leaving behind silence and a truth that felt heavier than any chain. That morning, the girl walked barefoot through the fields. She touched the soil with her hands. She listened to the quiet rustle of the crops. For the first time, she did not see them as simple plants. She felt their warmth, their life reaching toward her. A tear rolled down her cheek, but it was not a tear of sadness. It was something new, hope. The farmer worked beside her, glancing at her quietly. He did not need to speak. She knew he had always believed in her even when she did not believe in herself. The neighbors soon noticed the change. They came again, looking at the farm with envy and disbelief. Some asked questions, some whispered that the farmer must be hiding some secret trick. But none of them knew the truth, and she no longer cared what they thought. At night, she sat by the fire, her hands folded in her lap. She remembered the voices of the auctioneer, the cruel laughter, the whispers that called her broken. For so long she believed them. But now she had proof. She was not broken. She carried a gift greater than she had ever imagined. Still, she struggled with the weight of it. She whispered to the farmer one evening, "What if they find out? What if they try to take me away?" Her fear was real. Her gift could make her valuable, and value often attracted danger. The farmer looked at her, his face calm but firm. "Then they will have to go through me first." His words settled deep in her heart. He was not afraid, and so she found strength in him. The days grew brighter. She walked with a new kind of pride, not arrogance, but quiet acceptance. She worked with her hands in the soil, knowing that life bloomed where she walked. The farm was no longer just his, it was theirs, grown from their work, their struggle, and her hidden gift. For the first time in her life, she no longer asked why he had chosen her. Now she understood. He had seen something no one else cared to see. He had given her a chance when she had none, and in return she had given him more than either of them had expected. The truth of her species was no longer a curse. It was her strength. And as she lay in bed that night listening to the soft wind outside, she realized something powerful. The galaxy had been wrong. She was not worthless. She was life itself. And nothing could take that truth away from her again. The morning air was crisp, and the farm glowed under the first rays of the sun. The alien girl walked through the fields, her hands brushing against the tall crops, feeling their strength and warmth. She had learned to trust the life around her, and in return, the earth seemed to flourish with every step she took. The farmer followed, carrying a basket of freshly picked vegetables, and a quiet understanding passed between them. They did not need words. The bond they had formed was unspoken but unbreakable. Word of the farm's miraculous growth had begun to spread, reaching neighboring communities and even distant towns. People came with curiosity, some with skepticism, others with envy. They watched the girl work, saw the way the soil seemed richer and the crops taller wherever she went. Murmurs of disbelief filled the air. "It cannot be one girl," they whispered. "This land thrives against all odds." Yet none of them understood that it was not magic but her presence, her gift, the life she carried within her. One afternoon, a merchant arrived with wagons full of goods. He had heard of the farm and wanted to trade. The girl observed him carefully, her instincts sharp from years of mistrust. She noticed the greed in his eyes, the way he measured the value of things with cold numbers. Not people, not life, only wealth. She felt a shiver, wondering if he could see her gift and decide it was worth more than she could imagine. The farmer greeted the merchant warmly, but the girl stayed behind, watching, ready to act if needed. The merchant offered high prices for the produce, marveling at the farm's bounty, but then he asked a question that made the girl's blood run cold. "And what of her?" he said, gesturing toward her. "Surely the one who makes this land flourish must be of great value to you." His tone was polite, but his intent was clear. He wanted to take her, claim her gift, and profit. The girl's heart pounded, her hands clenched, but she remained calm. She had faced cruelty before, had been sold as worthless, but never again would she allow anyone to treat her as an object. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "This farm does not belong to you, and neither do I." The merchant's smile faltered, surprised by her boldness. The farmer placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes locking with hers, silently giving her the strength to stand firm. For hours, the merchant tried to convince them, offering more and more, but the girl and the farmer refused. Their unity was stronger than gold, and no amount of money could break it. The alien girl realized in that moment that her life was not about being sold or valued by others. It was about choice, about the power to decide her own path. She had survived the auction, survived the whispers of worthlessness, and now she stood, unshakable. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in colors of fire and gold, the girl walked to the barn where the animals slept. She knelt beside a small foal, touching its soft fur, and felt the same life flowing through it that flowed through her. The farmer joined her, sitting quietly, and together they watched the farm breathe. The wind rustled through the crops, carrying whispers of gratitude from the earth itself, as if acknowledging the gift she brought. The days turned into weeks, and the farm prospered like never before. The alien girl learned to plant new seeds, discovering plants that had never grown in this soil. She experimented carefully, guided by instinct and patience, and each attempt succeeded. The land seemed to answer to her, bending and shaping itself around her touch. She began to understand her gift fully, not just survival, but growth, abundance, and life itself. Word of the farm continued to spread, but now the girl and the farmer welcomed visitors with caution and wisdom. They taught others about the care of the land, the importance of respect, and the power of life nurtured with patience and love. Some doubted, but those who stayed learned quickly that the alien girl was no ordinary being. She was a living force of nature, and those who ignored her lessons learned only hardship. One night, the girl stood outside staring at the stars, thinking of her past, the cruel auction, the laughter of those who called her worthless. She no longer felt fear or shame, only resolve and pride. The galaxy had tried to define her by what she could not do, but she had shown them what she could do. She had turned a farm from ruin to paradise, saved lives, grown crops, and built a home filled with hope. The farmer joined her under the stars, handing her a cup of water. His presence was comforting, a steady anchor in her life. They spoke little, but the words that passed between them were enough. Trust, respect, and quiet. Understanding, the alien girl knew that her gift was more than just life in the soil. It was the courage to stand, to protect, and to choose her destiny. She smiled, finally feeling the freedom that had always been denied. As dawn approached, the girl walked. Through the fields, touching the plants, the soil felt warm and alive beneath her fingers, and she understood fully that she had not only survived but had become something greater. Her past, her pain, her struggles, they were all part of the path that led her here, and now she was no longer a girl labeled worthless. She was a guardian of life, a force of growth, a symbol of hope. And with the farmer by her side, she knew the farm and her future would flourish forever. The seasons passed and the farm became more than just land with crops and animals. It became a symbol of hope, a quiet miracle that grew because one man chose to see value where others saw nothing. The alien girl who had once been called worthless was now at the center of it all. Her hands were strong, her back straight, and her heart full. Visitors came from far away, not just to trade but to ask questions. They wanted to know how such a farm could survive storms, drought, and disease when others failed. Some came with respect, others with jealousy. But none could deny the truth when they saw her walk through the fields and saw how the crops leaned gently toward her, as if greeting her like an old friend. One morning, a group of important officials arrived. Their clothes were clean, their boots shiny, and their faces serious. They claimed they came in peace only to study the success of the farm. But the girl felt something else in their words, something colder. They asked many questions about the soil, the water, the weather. And then, slowly, they began to ask about her. Where did she come from? One asked, and what is her background? Another added, did you notice anything strange about her? A third one said while looking at her like she was a machine, not a person. The farmer answered calmly, she came from a dark place, but she brought light. His words were simple, but powerful. The officials didn't understand. They saw numbers and results, not stories and sacrifice. Later that night, the girl sat by the fire, her hands resting in her lap. Her eyes stared into the flames, thinking of the old days, of chains, of hunger, of the cold auction floor. But now she was here, sitting in a home built with patience and trust. She whispered, they still see me as a tool, not a person. The farmer sat beside her, his face calm. Let them see what they want, he said. I know who you are. You know who you are. That's all that matters. She looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had once feared him, then trusted him, and now she could not imagine her life without him. He had taken her in when the galaxy had thrown her away. He had never asked for anything but honesty and hard work. Time passed, and the officials sent word again. This time, they wanted to take her to a research center for study. They claimed it would be temporary and for the good of all. But the girl's chest tightened with fear. She remembered cages, remembered being measured and poked like an object. The farmer did not wait. He stood before the local council, with her by his side, and said firmly, she is not a thing to be studied, she is a person. She has worked harder than any of you, and this farm exists because of her. Some council members tried to argue, but the people of the village stood up. One by one, the same neighbors who once whispered insults now defended her. They had seen her save animals during the storm, feed the hungry, and help their crops recover. One old woman stood and said, she is not just life in the soil, she is life in this place. The officials left, not defeated by force but by truth. The girl cried that night, not out of fear, but out of love. She had always wanted a place to belong, and now she had it, not because she was useful, but because she was part of something real. Years passed, and the farm grew even stronger. Small children ran through the fields, some human, some alien, all happy. The girl, no longer just a girl, but a woman with confidence in her step, became a teacher to many. She showed others how to care for the land with respect, how to listen to the soil, how to grow with love instead of control. The farmer, older now, still worked beside her every morning. He often smiled without words, watching her guide others with the same quiet strength he once showed her. Their bond was deep, stronger than time, stronger than blood. They were family, chosen and true. One evening, the girl walked through the golden field as the sun set behind the hills. She looked at her hands, rough, worn, but full of purpose. She had not been born a hero. She had been thrown away, laughed at, and chained, but through kindness, hard work, and truth. She had rewritten her story. She was no longer the girl from the auction, no longer the one marked as sterile and worthless. She was the heart of a thriving farm, the teacher of a new generation, and a living reminder that no one's value can be decided by others. As the stars filled the sky, she sat on the porch with the farmer beside her. Their silence was warm, filled with peace. He looked at her and said softly, "It was an honor to take a chance on you." She smiled, her eyes bright. "And it was an honor to become myself." And so, in a small corner of a vast galaxy, a story that had begun in chains ended in freedom. A story not of power or war or fame, but of one human who believed, and one alien girl who proved that even the forgotten can bloom, if given a little kindness and a place to grow.